It's 101.1 FM and AM 1160 WCCS, and good morning. It is time for our weekly visit with Mr. Bob Pollock from the Penn State Extension Service. Joins us this morning, and you can give Bob a call this morning and ask your questions about your lawns and your gardens and your trees and your shrubs and your flowers and whatever it happens to be. He'll take a shot at answering it for you here this morning. So how's the strawberry crop doing? Is it rebounding with the weather turning nicer?
It's coming along finally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You never get worried because they're going to come on eventually.
Well, yeah. You hope they get started.
Yeah.
Things were a couple weeks behind.
Yeah, but
even starting to grow.
With strawberry crops, especially, size of the berries is affected by the weather, isn't it?
Yes, they can be affected.
And
by
juiciness
the weather.
and sweetness.
Yes, all of those things.
So
the overall health of the plant affects the size of the berry. Actually, the flower buds are formed on that plant last fall. So when you get into August and September and into October, the flower buds are actually being developed then.
Okay.
And so then the plant overwinters with those flower buds down in the plant. And then in the spring, then we start to get new growth, and then that flower truss develops further, and flowers are out on a little stem. And
so does the weather this year that we've had so far, the cool, very, very wet weather that we've had to this point, does that impact the sweetness of the berry? Or the juiciness of the berry?
Well, not varieties are so genetically more of the flavor is involved in genetics.
Okay.
The water content of the berry to a degree is also part of that genetics. So we have berries that are not shipping berries. So a lot of the ones that are grown on the East Coast and for home use and for processing, as well as pick your own and those fresh markets, a lot of those are grown and they're not really, they don't ship very well. We would not want to put them on a refrigerated truck and ship them to California. They're not going to hold up well because of the nature of that berry, the moisture content. It's softer, and it doesn't ship well. It doesn't hold up well.
Yeah.
Versus varieties that were bred to be firmer, less moisture content, and so those hold up better from a shipping perspective, a distribution perspective.
California doesn't want our berries anyway. I remember being in.
They've got.
I was walking in Garden Grove, California, in maybe 10 years or so ago in February, and right there along the sidewalk, a farmer had a field of strawberries that were in. I mean, there were berries there, and it was February.
Yeah, they're on a different cycle.
I said, "You lucky California."
Completely different.
Okay.
Production systems, types of berries. Although they've been trying to breed some of the flavor components back into some of those berries as they can, but it's a time-consuming process to do that.
It is Memorial Day weekend, and folks go to cemeteries,
Yes.
and they plant flowers around their graves. Sometimes, and this is the case at our church cemetery, the people plant blooms that come up every year, these leafy plants, and then after a period of years, it might take decades before it happens, nobody's coming to tend that grave anymore. And the plants that they put in all those years ago come up every year and just obscure the grave. And you can't get them out because they have multiplied to the point that it's like a forest around that. You could take the string trimmer and you could trim them down, but they come back and they seem to be thicker than ever. How do you get rid of these things?
So some of those were probably perennials.
Yeah.
So they're growing during the year, they're flowering during a certain period of time, and they'll have foliage the rest, and then in the winter they'll die back, and then in the spring they'll start all over again.
Yeah.
They'll come up from that main root system. And oftentimes those plants are able to spread, and then we eventually get to the point where you're describing where they're overgrown.
Yeah.
So
you see a big thing of tall green stuff, and you
Yes.
figure there must be a headstone in there somewhere.
Yes. So you got to, if they're perennials, you can go in, take your spade with you to the.
You got to dig them out by the root.
And dig them out, lift them.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of the perennials can be divided, so you can take that big clump and mess and dig it all out, separate it out, and then replant just one clump of it.
Okay.
And move the other clumps.
And
to,
in 30 years, somebody else is
headstones.
going to have to deal with it.
Yeah. Or try to make use of those if you can use them in your own garden, or share them around. Or if not, then those divisions can be disposed of, but you still have that plant there, but you've essentially gone in and fixed things back up again.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of plants are that way. Different plants have different types of. So an iris plant would have, if they're perennial plants like an iris, then those have their root system is pretty shallow, right on the surface of the ground, but you can dig, lift all that out, gently tease off all the soil, and then you'll start to see the roots and where you can make divisions and make that plant smaller again and then replant it.
Yeah.
And other plants like grasses, ornamental grasses, those grow in a clump, so you can just take that clump and divide it into quarters or even smaller portions, replant just one of those, and you'll still have the plant, but at much more manageable size.
Yeah.
And those grasses tend to grow out from where the main plant was to begin with. They'll grow out in a circle like a donut. So they'll have a kind of hole in the middle after a while, and everything keeps growing outward, but you get a bigger, denser clump. But you can go in and just divide all that up and then have multiple plants, or just pick one and replant that.
I'm going to take the opportunity now to say to everybody who has family buried in a cemetery somewhere, wherever that cemetery might be, if it's not a perpetual care cemetery where somebody is sending you a bill every year for the maintenance, just consider that there are churches or cemetery associations that have to foot the bill for mowing and trimming up around your loved ones' graves, and it's probably a good idea. Make a donation, because that's a lot of money. I know that our church is going to spend between $4,000 and $5,000 just on mowing our cemetery this year. And for tiny little churches and tiny little communities, if you have family buried someplace you want their grave to be tended, it's a good idea to help them out.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we have those dotted all over the county.
Yeah, they're everywhere. They're hidden cemeteries you never knew were there. All right.
And some really get hidden.
hidden graves because of it.
Yeah, the grass and everything grows up.
Okay,
yeah, so that's a good thing to work on this weekend and tidy things up. And if you have loved ones that maybe you don't tended or haven't visited lately, it might be a good weekend to do that and check things out and see where most cemeteries have maps and have documentation on where everybody is, and so that if you're not sure, it might be your grandparents or great-grandparents and you're not sure where they are, you can always go to the office or make contact with whoever's in charge.
I want to ask you another question about cemeteries. When fresh graves get a little bit unfresh after 6 months, a year, and the ground settles, the rain has created the situation where now you have shale and stone on top, and that all needs to be picked off of there. Maybe the ground sinks down a little bit and you have to fill in. Talk a little bit about how to plant grass seed over top of that, what are the things that you should be doing to make sure that this big pile of stone and dirt that looks so nasty will blend in and will become sort of the very respectful carpet that you'd like it to be.
Yes, and if you have to go and do that, you're right. You've got to clear off some of the gravel or stones that might have surfaced from turning that soil over. You need to look at the soil. Is it just a bunch of clay? Or was it able to be put back in place where they separated the subsoil and the clay from the topsoil? Hopefully there's a layer of topsoil on there. If not, you can add some back in, work that in to the top 2 or 3 inches along with what's there, and that'll help improve that, and then level that off, and then you're ready to. You might want to just put a little bit of fertilizer on there, some starter fertilizer, like 10-20-10 or 5-10-5 or something like that, just to give a little bit of, because we don't know. In most cases, there probably has not been fertilizer applications to that area in a while, and maybe a little bit of lime too.
So you want to throw some energy in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fix that up, get the nutrients where they need to be, seed it down, cover it over.
Cover it over with straw or something like that?
Yeah, just straw or even a little bit of soil. And after you throw the seed on in a small area like that, you can easily just tamp it down a little bit, firm it up, because that soil's loose from it being worked, and that's the same reason it settles, because that soil was removed from there, dug up, and then as it firms back in place, then it settles. We need to add a little bit more in there.
Okay. All right. A little cemetery talk this morning
Yeah.
on Memorial Day weekend. That's rather appropriate, isn't it?
It is.
All right. So very good. We're about a minute left in the segment. Anything coming up you need to tell folks about
just
events?
We had mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I think, about a plant sale that was coming up with our Penn State Master Gardeners, and that'll be at the Salzburg Herbal Society on June 1 and 2.
Okay.
So
it's next
that's
Thursday and Friday?
Another week yet, but just a reminder about that.
Friday and Saturday next week.
And they'll have many quality plants available to attract bees, hummingbirds, and butterflies. And that'll be at the Salzburg Herbal Society, 105 Point Street, Salzburg.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
There you go.
He's Bob Pollock from the Extension Service. It's Indiana